This is a 429 Cadillac, and today it's my nightmare. 12 bolts on the water pump? I'm not complaining. I think it's just like ignorance was bliss. Oh, we're leaking on this side as well. And then I guess best case scenario, we magically fix everything and it works great, because that's how things go around here. Nope. No, it's not. Nope. I love this car. It's a 67 Cadillac. I traded a 27 Ford Roadster for it. The engine was rebuilt. I had to deal with the transmission. I replaced the steering column, wiring, that kind of stuff. And since I've had it, it's always had a small coolant leak. Boy howdy. Let's talk about 429 Cadillac engines and the front of the motor, because it's a design unparalleled. I mean, maybe the nail heads are kind of like this, but holy smokes. So what we're dealing with here is a coolant leak that's finding, you can kind of see it down there. It's sitting on top of the block. The thing is, I don't know where it's coming from, because this is a water crossover pipe. It's not a common thing, but it's on some Buick, Olds, Pontiac, Cadillac engines. That means we have a gasket here in the head, a gasket there in the head. We have the thermostat here. We have it connecting to the water pump down there at that O-ring. I think the leak is somewhere over here in this area, but I don't really know. And it may be straight at the water pump. The thing is, the water pump has that many bolts. It's a million. But that's not the craziest thing. The craziest thing about these motors is all of that stuff bolts onto the timing cover, which is this section here. Let's see, put the light back in. Block, timing cover, water pump. It's the timing cover where the water pump bolts on also houses integrally the oil pump. The distributor goes in there and the oil filter comes off of there, and if I remember correctly, the fuel pump is even in there. So I'm correct, the water pump bolts go through the timing cover to another gasket into the block. So this is going to be a test of wills. Let's go back to the beginning. So intermittently, if I've driven this car on the highway and then get off of the highway, it will start to get hot, and it doesn't like to cool back down. Now granted, I am running the stock gauge, which is, you know, an electronic gauge that goes, so we may put in a mechanical gauge for a while so we can really get a sense of what's going on. If I'm smart, I'll put in two gauges. I'll keep the stock one and then I'll put in a mechanical gauge so I can actually put a number to the wiggly madoo. I believe this is the stock radiator that just got a paint job, and there's some green crusties. There's a little bit of corrosion, suggestion of actually a leak, maybe a small one. Obviously have a leak somewhere in this ridiculous water pump system. So if I've got to drain the radiator and get involved, I decided I would replace the radiator with an eBay special aluminum radiator. The aluminum should help keep things cool. That'll be good. And then while we're in there with the radiator out, it's time to deal with the water pump, the water neck, and all of that stuff. I gotta cry uncle at pulling the timing cover. That's a whole, that's like every other motor. Pulleys, balancers, everything to get that off, to get the inner gasket out. The reason I'm hoping it'll be all right is I don't have any coolant in the oil or anything like that. I just have coolant seeping out from the top. So I'm hoping it's the water pump gasket. But if you guys aren't sure what we're dealing with, these are all of the gaskets involved in just the water pump and water neck. It's so many places to screw up. So while I may solve one problem, how many problems will I create on this journey? I've been dreading this for a calendar year. Look how low this thing has gotten from sitting over a couple of months. Like, the radiator's half empty anyway, so now's the time, I guess. This is one of those problems you've probably encountered where you know that trying to fix it could create more problems. We're dealing with I think this motor was made for 3 years only. It's running well. This little problem requires you to take so much apart that the chance of you screwing something up, putting it back together, there's just a lot of room for error. So you basically have to think it to death, and you get to a point where you go, I've had all I can stand, I can't stand no more, and you dive in, and I think I'm finally there today. All right, gang, we're draining the coolant, which is no big deal. It's got a petcock that works, which is kind of nice. Anyway, but I'm noticing what looks like a coolant leak running down the side. You can kind of see the paint stripping out and all that stuff, and I kind of traced it back up, and this looks like it might have been a repair at some point that's not doing so great. So just more evidence that this was overdue. Doesn't mean I want to do it. So we got the radiator out. I cleaned up. I love my dog, so you got to be careful with antifreeze. Everybody knows that if you work on cars, smell sweet. Animals love it. So we've soaked out anything that collected it. The old antifreeze, unfortunately, I got a bunch of transmission fluid in it when I pulled the transmission lines. Happens kind of normally. So that'll all go back to the auto parts store, to the recycler, because, you know, I'm not gonna tell anybody what to do, but let's do what we can I'll leave it at that. Do what we can. All right, dudes, so I'm doing my best. I just pulled off the fan clutch and fan and the power steering pulley, or power steering belt. I roached this thing by putting it on twisted somehow, because I'm a moron. But I'm doing very, very diligent work trying to keep the hardware with the part I pulled off, because we've got a mixture of all sizes, fine thread, coarse thread, lengths, you name it. Now that that's out of the way, we can snatch this pulley off of here and get a better look at our situation. All this discoloration is water pump leaking, you know? I think it's from up here and maybe right at the head. This engine is unbelievably powerful and moves this car, like 5,000 pound car, down the road at 70 miles an hour without an issue. But, I'm just saying, gang, like, oddball, sort of rare engines, whatever, if this was on the side of the road, I'd be there for a week, man. Like, you need so many gaskets, you need a full toolkit, and you need enough space to lay out all the stuff you're taking off, because, man, it's gonna be a lot to go back on. Very happy to have this in the garage to do this right now. I also don't know if you could pull this water pump without pulling the radiator, because unless you're gonna take the distributor out, I don't think you can go up with it. I think you have to come out with it. So what I'm seeing here is I gotta take these fuel lines out of the way, power steering pumps pushed that way, alternators off the alternator bracket. If the AC was on the car, it would be here, so that bracket would have to come off and go, the whole system would have to go up. Then we've got to undo 2 bolts here, 2 bolts here, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, like 12 bolts on the water pump. I'm not complaining. I think it's just like, ignorance was bliss. If I do have a problem on the side of the road later, great Scott. I guess I know better than to try. I'll just tow it. Here we go. All right, well, this is crazy. I don't even know what I'm dealing with here really, but it looks like because this is the timing cover, it's entirely possible my leak is coming from right here. And I don't even know how to approach that. To pull this off, the distributor's got to come out, the crank pulley's got to come off, oil filter, fuel filter. That's beyond what I'm ready to do. I gotta pray it was somewhere else. I'm nervous about it though. Also, look at this. It's a pretty absurd variety of hardware to put a water pump on. And I don't know if it's right or not. It just, you know, it's what came out. So I fear my leak is actually right back there. So I guess we'll clean this up, see what's going on. Oh boy, gang. This is giving me the heebie-jeebies. Let me show you what I got. I'm seeing no evidence really. I guess maybe this part, is that part of a gasket? Hang on. I'm seeing very little evidence of a gasket. Here is, it doesn't feel like there's a gasket there, but we'll dig in. I'll let you know if I'm wrong. There's certainly no gasket here. A lot of RTV though. That's clearly not doing a darn thing. I guess we had a gasket over here, which is the passenger side, but I'm not feeling any kind of gasket on the driver's side where we have the leak. There's evidence of a leak right here, which could be part of our problem. And then, yeah, this area could be a problem. This is definitely evidence of a problem. But my concern is, I don't know how to tell if our problem is really just where this meets. And all I can think to do is clean it up the absolute best I can and then smear some RTV in there as I go to put this thing back on. I know that's not a great solution, but getting into the timing cover is just insane. It's so much, there's so many layers of things that could go wrong. And it makes me nervous because part of this gasket already broke out. It's like paper thin. So I don't even know what to do there, because the top portion of the timing cover is kind of unbolted right now, but the bottom portion is all bolted in around the crankshaft. I do not love this design, so I'm gonna hammer it with a ton of brake clean up all of our surfaces, do a poor job with RTV around the timing cover where it meets the block. Because those water jackets, like, they clearly go in straight through here, which means this whole bit and this bit on the other side, you know, it definitely seemed like the leak was over here. Granted, some of that could have been from the water neck, but this is tricky. Tricky. Hot rodding. All right, it's been a few seconds. I've cleaned up all this with a wire wheel because I want it to be super nice. I also went ahead and cleaned up the back of the fuel pump, which is living down here. That's all nice and shiny. I cleaned this area out. Remember this, we're gonna look in the other side of this in a second. So we're gonna pull this thing out, which goes to the heater, and tape it because it seems to be leaking, but it's hard to tell because the water neck is clearly leaking where the thermostat goes. So we'll snatch that out of there, put a new one of those guys in. At least there's a gasket, so that's, you know, way to go, pal. And then I cleaned these up. Oh, I got a little more to get off of that. That's one of the things with, you know, people debate RTV or no RTV. If it's an old cast piece that's pitted like that, RTV, like, absolutely. Just, you know, nice thin coat that'll seat your gasket. The issue and the sort of the stress buildup of this is there's no, every time one of these gaskets leaks, you got to pull the whole unit off, and so you got to put all the gaskets back on, meaning you got to get them all back on and all not leaking in one try. Otherwise, you're starting over. All right, gang, so everything's nice and clean. What I think I'm going to do now to maybe hedge my bets the best that I possibly can is I'm going to use some ultra black RTV because this stuff works great for a lot of stuff. I'll put a thin coat on. I'm going to attach my gaskets to their surfaces, and then I'm going to wait and let all that set up. So we'll put the water pump gasket on the water pump itself. We'll put the crossover gaskets on the crossover, let it all set up. I mean, set up. And then once that's stuck, we'll do another round onto the block and onto this crazy timing cover and cinch it all in there. Basically, I think I'm gonna have to fidget with this stuff enough that I don't want the gaskets moving around on the surfaces. And that's the best way I can figure to, you know, do it. All right, so we've got those kind of stuck on there. I'm gonna let it set up for a little bit. Guess we'll take this opportunity to go get some exercise while that actually sets up. Because, you know, gang, gotta stay in shape, and I am. Well, I failed to stay in shape, so now I gotta get back in shape. And we're all getting older, aren't we? So we'll give it hell, and then we'll come back and get our, you know, hot rod back together. We're back from our little exercise bit. We're no spring chickens, but we ain't done yet. I did find a shop manual, or part of a shop manual, and I found the disassembly procedure in this, and that included taking the water crossover, the outlets from the head, out first. And so that leads me to believe that the installation process would be the reverse, so I could put the water pump in and then install that. I understand that's a risk, but I'm gonna try this other Hail Mary risk while I'm at it. I'm gonna take one of these Jimmy Jams that comes with the RTV, and I'm gonna see if I can get anything into that little gap. I don't know if it'll cinch up, but I'm gonna try and fill it just in case. Then we'll bolt the water pump back on, put the water neck back on. I'm gonna let this RTV sit completely overnight too, because, well, Hail Mary, like I said. And gang, I don't know what the hell is going on with these bolts. I don't know if it's all the guy could find when he put this on or what, but there's 3 different sizes, so I guess we're just gonna put them back in because I don't really know any better. So let's grab the water pump, let's do it. A thin coat of RTV on the gasket. Now I understand that some people say, let's see if these dowel pins will do the trick. You should put your gaskets on dry or whatever. Well, the last guy didn't use a gasket at all. He just used RTV. In our case, I'm gonna do the opposite. I'm using a gasket and RTV because these castings are not in killer shape. So anywhere we have an issue as far as like unevenness or pitting, I guess I'm gonna put RTV on all these bolts because I don't have a clue. We're gonna do the same thing I always do, which is get everything started before we seal anything up completely or torque anything down. But I'm trying to work fast because I got wet RTV and it's 368 bolts. I'm really glad I used this whole thing to keep everything organized. Would not have had a clue. Hands down, most intense water pump install of my life, and we're not even halfway there. So I got all of these bolts in and kind of torqued down. And by torqued down, I mean kind of just did it by feel, because these are just threaded into this. These run all the way through the timing chain cover into like tiny little spots. And it's like, I need this to be torqued down and tight, but man, stripping one of these threads out is just, I mean, it's gonna keep me up at night, because where we go from there is pull the balancer off, everything, distributor out, everything, timing cover. We start all over with a timing cover gasket, and I just can't imagine that that's the standard service procedure to changing a water pump. But when I tightened these up, I got a little squeeze of water out back here. I saw it. So this may have been the source of my leak already, and if it wasn't, it might be now. But what do you do? Like, what are you gonna do? Because what do you do? Next step is to install this water neck thing. I'm gonna install it dry. This is where we have the O-ring situation, so kind of just want to see everything fits before I get too involved with it and RTV everything. But I've got it set up over here. We've got the gaskets on it. It's, you know, the internet says double up these little donuts, which is pretty intense because that covers basically the entire thing. And then in addition, some fellers suggest you need a washer that will fit over this whole thing and yet still fit inside this guy here. I mean, I'll look. If I have one that's magical, I'll call it like fate. If I don't, I guess we're going with 2 of those things. And I guess I should probably do a dab of RTV down here. All right, gang, I was able to dry fit this thing surprisingly well. It went in, which kind of shocked me. So I don't know what to do except to go for it at this point. Part of me was gonna install these gaskets dry, the ones on the ends, the ones on the heads. That's what I mean. Those are the words that we use that name car parts. But I realized, you know, it only would save me a set of the gaskets that I'm smearing this crap on right now. And if I have a leak, I'm probably gonna be needing a new set of gaskets anyway because they're glued to one side. So, just gonna, you know, all or nothing this thing right now. All right, what I got left in my pile of stuff over here is the water pump pulley, fan clutch, air cleaner, that kind of stuff. 2 belts, fuel lines, upper and lower hoses, heater hoses, and of course the new radiator. And my assessment is I guess I can't test any of this tomorrow without installing essentially all of that. Well, we're playing that dangerous game of like, well, while we're in there, look at that bend in this fuel line. I didn't do that, but this thing is a big block, man. It's thirsty. We're gonna fix that while we're in there. All right, I'm decidedly still not in love with this fuel line. Dang it, that was in the drink. So I've been working, tightening everything up. I'm not sure why it is that when you work between your engine and your radiator, you may as well just be shoving your entire arm in a cheese grater. I'm gonna go fill this thing with water and no antifreeze because, well, 2 reasons. 1, I don't expect success, and 2, I just don't expect success here. Because I decided to let the RTV set up overnight out of paranoia, I've had plenty of time to manifest that paranoia into like all sorts of worst case scenarios. It's kind of like watching like the Blair Witch Project the night before you go camping. Basically, we put on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 new gaskets. We removed and replaced 4 hoses, 2 transmission lines. What I'm getting at here is, and the gasket that I didn't replace is most likely, I think, the one that was leaking originally, that was put on, I think maybe poorly when the engine was put together, where the timing cover meets the block, which is this area right in here. So, worst case scenario, we made the original problem worse, and now it will leak coolant into the inside of the timing cover, which will ultimately work its way into the oil pan, which will give us a milkshake, which means we will have to do this whole process again, but go 1 step further into the timing chain cover, which is not 1 step. To get into that, we've got to take out the distributor. We'll be pulling the oil pump off, the oil filter, the timing chain gasket, and the bottom of the timing chain cover goes into the front of the oil pan. So there's a gasket there too, in addition to everything we just did. Next case, we didn't really change anything. We still have a leak where there has always been a leak. Middle of the road is we eliminated 1 or 2 leaks that might have been up here. We eliminated leaks in the radiator and hopefully increased our cooling capacity by going aluminum instead of old school, although we're going to keep that in case that's got to go to the radiator shop, because this is not great. And then I guess best case scenario, we magically fix everything and it works great, because that's how things go around here. Nope. No, it's not. Nope. But come on, like, we're working on a 1967 Cadillac convertible, right? Right? It's 75 degrees and sunny, so it could be way worse. It could be way worse. Although this is an intimidating job for being such a, like, a simple kind of thing, fixing a little leak. Oh no. We're already leaking. We haven't even begun. We're leaking out of the bolt hole. I guess I'll try to tighten it down, which is intimidating. And if that doesn't work, then oh, we're leaking on this side as well. Let me see where else we're leaking. Not off to a good start. All right, well, I guess I'm gonna pull these lower water neck bolts, let the water that's in there drain below those, let it dry for a few minutes, RTV the snot out of all of the water neck bolts, and try again, because it's clearly leaking past the threads and then out through the bolt where the washer meets the water neck. But I want to do it one at a time so I don't lose my tension on the water neck to the block. Well, gang, it turns out that I didn't put any RTV on those bolts. So, oops, it wasn't not enough. It was, well, it wasn't enough because I didn't put any at all. So, I think we're prepared. I let it sit for another, little while, refilled the radiator. It is holding water. It had started to leak when I just filled the thing up the first time, so that was a pretty good clue. We had a problem. I think it's time to actually start it up. I think my dread, I've waited myself out basically. My fear of the truth has been replaced by my willingness to just want to get it over with. So, we got a fire extinguisher nearby. You should always have one nearby, preferably between you and the exit, because that's the way you should be going. And if you want to go back and put her out, that's what you got to do. But we did get into the fuel lines, so that's why I'm saying that. Here goes nothing. I'm gonna run it without the cap because I always do that for a while. I want it to have a way to get the air bubbles out, and then we'll put the cap on, and that will add 16 pounds of pressure at some point, and we'll see if that blows the seals right out. Sounds fatalist. We're gonna try it anyway. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. Look at that sunset. Look, the majesties of a murder van in the sun. Tighten your grounds, gang. It's your first line of defense against a totally smoked dead battery. When you're waiting for something to go wrong, you like hear every creak and rattle, like the engine's about to just completely come apart. And it's not. It's really not. It's gonna be okay. This thing only has dummy gauges on it right now, but they do work. Well, they light up when there's no oil pressure or something. So temperature is moving up. That thermostat, the temperature sending unit on a 429 Cadillac is on the driver's side head, which that's a good place to know how hot that head is, but it doesn't really tell you anything about the passenger side. So if this experiment works, we're gonna put a gauge somewhere closer to the center of this water neck here, maybe in line with the upper radiator hose, because I'd rather know what the whole engine's doing. And that's just a needle, and like, I don't know what it's telling me. It's telling me needleage. All right, we're at middle needle on the temperature gauge. Had a little bit of a leak that we discussed. Hopefully I didn't make it worse, but we've also had a bit of a cooling issue. Obviously it's a convertible. We drive it all summer, highway, anywhere, everywhere. And so after being on the highway for a while, generating, some decent RPMs, pulling this thing down the road at 70, 75 miles an hour, I'd get off the highway, and suddenly on the on-ramps, we'd be like getting hot, and can't say I love that. So, oh, here we go. All right, let's see the bubbles. There we go. Look at it. See the level dropping down. That's what. So the thermostat just opened. You can see the water level dropping. That's why we have a handy dandy gallon of water. All right, we got a leak detected, but it's transmission fluid, which is not good either. If I was me, where would I put my light? Oh, right in front of me. I can't tell. There's a drop down there, but I can't tell what it is. Oh no. No, that's a drip coming out from behind the edge of the timing cover. Not good. Now granted, that's happening with the car off and hot, which means, you know, it's just under pressure right there. I can't tell. Do we have that everywhere else? Does anyone know? How would you? You can't see anything. All right, let's fire it back up, see how we do. I mean, I'm looking for everything. Fuel leaks, coolant leaks, transmission leaks. We had to take a lot of stuff apart. While we had the engine off, I did try to reach in where I had a little bit of a leak and tighten those bolts down. And it's probably a good idea to like try to torque everything, but again, there's RTV in there, so you risk like breaking that seal. You'd also need some magical wrenches because you cannot get to more than half of the 12 bolts holding that water. Yeah, 12, for real, for real. All right, gang, we seem to be leak-ish free. I got a quarter turn out of the 2 bolts on the passenger side. That seemed to stop the little drip. I haven't seen any new leaks yet. It idled for over 10 minutes, I think, and stayed cool, which, considering there's no airflow in this garage whatsoever, the aluminum radiator and just the fan pulling air is a good sign. However, that's not where I had my problem. I had it after running long distances on the highway. Once I got off at the exit, she kind of got hot and didn't want to come back down. So at this point, we get to test it out though. So that's good news. We're not going to be in the garage working on it. We're going to be out there driving it and taking a look. Just so we get the real coolant temp coming out of the block back into the radiator. And yeah, just goes to show, I guess, that if you worry, you suffer twice. And in this case, if I hadn't worried so much, I wouldn't have suffered so much because it looks like it worked out, right? Like, not trying to jinx it. It's an old car. Things will happen. But that's the hobby, isn't it, guys? All right. Anyway, good luck on your projects out there. We will see you next time on Between the Sharks when we do something else.